Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's web seminar, Jumpstart Your Business, Are You Really Ready? My name is Laura Haight, and I am the Managing Partner at Portfolio Communications. I will be your moderator today. We at Portfolio are very excited to be working with the SBDC to bring you this on-demand presentation of the Jumpstart series. This is the first of a three-part series of events that focus on preparing you to start a business. This first step is to determine if you have considered all the key elements, personal, financial, and professional, that may augur either for or against starting a business of your own right now. After part one, if you think you're ready, parts 2 and 3 are more detailed examinations of how to create a business plan, analyze your market, and understand critical financials. The Small Business Development Center is dedicated to helping small businesses and entrepreneurs to start, grow, and thrive. You'll hear more about the services you as an entrepreneur have access to during the presentation. Our presenters today are Scott Welchell, the Area Manager and a Business Consultant for the Greenville Area SBDC, and Natalie Dunham, an attorney with the Weiss Law Firm, the sponsor of this event. There will be a Q&A session following the presentation. So now, on to our program, with Scott Welchell leading off. Scott, welcome.
Thank you, Laura. Well, let's jump right into this presentation and begin with a brief overview of what the Small Business Development Center is and how we work with small business owners in South Carolina and across the country. In South Carolina, there are 17 local offices of the Small Business Development Center. We act as one network, one statewide organization, and local offices are hosted by either the Clemson University, the University of South Carolina State University, or Winthrop University. And in the upstate region, Clemson hosts local offices in Greenville, Spartanburg, Greenwood, and in Clemson. The entire network of small business development centers are formed through a partnership of the Federal Small Business Administration, the SBA, the state of South Carolina, and our host universities. Among the services that the SBDCs offer are free and confidential one-on-one counseling, business consulting for those who have an idea, who want to build a business around it, or those managing existing businesses that have issues or concerns or plans to grow and expand, or just to get some outside perspective on addressing issues, whether it be strategic planning, operational planning, employee issues. We cover the entire gamut of business issues for the small business community through one-on-one consulting. We also offer some seminars and workshops similar to this in a variety of formats, either on-site or online, that cover a range of topics as well. We also provide some networking, support, referrals, and we really act as an information resource for the small business community, whether that's connecting entrepreneurs to research universities or to other business service groups in their community. And from time to time, we also offer special purpose programs such as specific events targeting lender matchmaking sessions, exporting or international trade sessions, or government contracting specialties as well. Just to give a real quick recap of the impact we like to have, and we documented for 2011, the most recent year, the numbers are available. The Small Business Development Center staff in the upstate of South Carolina directly impacted more than 60 businesses to document startups that were not in business and now are. We served well over 400 individuals through one-on-one business consulting and counseling. We were able to help those business clients to either create or retain an additional 442 jobs in the local economy, and touched just under $20 million in capital formation, which may be owner's investment, maybe private investment, or bank debt to those client businesses. As part of the statewide network, we have a fairly clear mission that the Small Business Development Centers of South Carolina exist to advance the state's economic development by helping entrepreneurs grow successful businesses. And the vision we've recently adopted as well is to be recognized as the gateway and proven provider of small business assistance helping to drive entrepreneurial growth and success in South Carolina. It's no small task, but it is the world we live in every day. At this point, we'll just walk briefly through an agenda for today. We really have three main sections of today's session, which are all around the preparation stage. Before we like to work in a world where mistake avoidance is a win. Anytime we have the opportunity to work with a business owner or a budding entrepreneur to plan ahead, to look at issues that may be on the horizon just beyond their perspective, we do try to proactively help them through planning to identify those and prepare ahead of time. And today's session will focus on some personal analysis, overview of legal structures, and forming an entity for the business, and address a number of feasibility issues as well. And just to preview that parts 2 and 3 of this Jumpstart series will be available as well online. And the part 2 of the business plan walks through that process, provides some great tools and questions to answer and issues to address during the business planning process. And part 3 will deal with financing and starting the business when you're ready to take those steps. Move right into the preparation. We'll address first some personal issues. And we want to step back and look at where are you in your life, what kind of personal characteristics you possess that are common and consistent with the entrepreneur. Obviously, the first one to start off with is, are you a self-starter? This is a very common interview question we've all faced at some point in our life, but it's never been more important than right now to ask yourself, before you commit to starting a business, before you invest your own time and effort and money, resources into a business venture, if it comes down to you, if it all depends on you, are you going to be the one who gets it done? Next, to look a little outside yourself, and how well do you get along with other personalities, different types of people in different roles? Are you able to make decisions, sometimes with very little notice or preparation? And do you have the stamina, the energy to run a business? How many hours a day do you have? Are you at your best in the morning, noon, afternoon, evening, or all of the above? A few more questions. Are you organized? How well do you plan ahead? Do you typically operate your calendar through your dashboard through your windshield as you're driving from place to place throughout the day, or do you plan ahead days, weeks, or months down the road? Do you have a strong passion? Is your drive strong enough to maintain your motivation? Starting a business, it's much like the common analogy of it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's not the kind of thing that's going to go from idea to reality in 3 days or 3 weeks, rarely in 3 months. And ultimately, if it's not still around in 3 years or 30 years, then you may not be satisfied. So with the mindset that you're embarking on a long journey, embarking on a marathon, not a sprint, do you have enough motivation, enough passion to see yourself through that process? And the last point here before the self-assessment is to look around you and realize that starting a business is a commitment that you make not just to yourself or to other potential investors or lenders, but also to your immediate peer group, whether it be your family, your personal friends and support network. Everyone sees the responsibilities, the commitments of time and effort, energy and resources that starting a business takes. And often it's a great question to ask with your family, discuss as a group or with your friends. Hey, if I embark on this, if I obligate resources or personal savings or all of my free time to this activity, will you be there to support me? And I do want to point out that among many other free tools that are available at the Small Business Administration website, www.sba.gov, there is a free self-assessment tool that asks these questions and many more to begin to give you some feedback on, does this look like you have enough in common with other people who have been successful to push you ahead to the next step, or are there some issues that you can step back and address before you move forward? Another area of the personal analysis is, what's your current financial situation like? if starting a new business is your last desperate attempt to survive financially because you've lost your job and have very little resources in the home, it's going to be a long fight. It's definitely not going to be easy to find outside financing. It's not impossible, but it's not easy right now. And if you don't have the resources within your personal finances, within your household, to fund the entire business yourself right now, and you're looking to borrow money from others, banks, other commercial lenders, it's very important to consider your personal credit score before you begin. Not every decision is made strictly on a personal credit score, but generally speaking, you will be asked sooner or later, and it will become an issue at some point. If you're looking to borrow part of the funds to start the business, you're still going to be expected in virtually every case to provide a significant portion of the cash to start the business on the front end. Typically 20% or more. In many cases in the current economy, depending on the type of industry and the use of the funds, 20 to 50% is a reasonable expectation to have. And if you are borrowing part of the funds from a bank or commercial lender especially, become familiar with the term collateral. Do you have assets that can be, your collateral is not what you've already invested in the business. Collateral is something of value held outside the business that you own personally, in most cases, that a bank or lender can place a lien against or have right to in order to collect repayment for the loan. And for many, the vast majority of business loan opportunities, collateral is not an option. It is a required element of the loan package. Well, I don't take a lot of pleasure in crushing dreams professionally, but it is important to be honest and upfront and address a couple business myths that we hear from time to time. And the first of these is, I want to start a business so I can be my own boss. Most of us don't realize just how many bosses we have until you become a business owner and realize that you don't work for one individual, you now work for every customer. And every customer may have the position to think that they are, in fact, your boss on a daily basis or while you're serving them. You'll quickly learn that your lenders, investors, other business partners are also your bosses to some extent. And every commitment you make, every obligation you have to the business is now your boss as well. So being your own boss, it'll feel better later, but on the front end, you're going to feel like you have far more bosses than before. The second myth about making more money, well, that one might be true. It may not be true for a while. While the common perception in the world today is that, oh, you own your own business, so you have a lot of sales, you must make a lot of money. Owning a business doesn't necessarily make you more money in terms of take-home pay. The business owner is the last one to get paid. Obviously, every supplier, every vendor, all the employees are paid. The debt is serviced. The banks are paid back. Other lenders or investors get theirs. And then if there's profit left, that becomes the owner's. The IRS has published some studies from time to time based on income tax returns that they analyze every year or so. And their findings are that households where the primary wage earner, the primary income earner, is self-employed or independent contractor, think 1099 or a small business owner, do on average have greater incomes than households where the primary wage earner is a regular employee, think a W-2, income tax, W-2 filing return employee. So while empirically on a national level the IRS says that business owners and self-employed do make more than the general public, the working adults like us, that doesn't always happen right away. That may be a reward you get to in time, but you can't always expect that the first few months at least. And now this little cartoon to give you just a second to sink in. The reality is that being successful is a combination not just of luck, but luck and preparation. But let's take a step further. Luck, hard work, and preparation. That being successful and productive is obviously a lot easier when you're working 70 hours a week than 7. but success is also a function of building a good team around you. As you start a new business, you may be the only employee. You may be the classic chief cook and bottle washer. However, even when you're in business by yourself, for yourself, you really aren't ever completely alone, because a good business needs to have input from a number of team members. One of the most common, frequent interaction team members would be an accountant or bookkeeper. The CPA, the Certified Public Accountant, is one of the most common business relationships that you'll need long term. And there are a number of others that are very important at various stages in the business, and one of those being an insurance agent or insurance broker to help you plan for and manage areas of risk within the business. Sometimes insurance is a required legal obligation. Sometimes insurance is just a good business strategy. But insurance agent, a banker, banks may be involved as a lender in the business to help structure financial opportunities to leverage cash at some point through debt. A banker may also be strictly just a service provider. If there is no bank debt, no loans to the business, you still need the banks or others to help you manage cash flow and structure the collection and payment of your obligations. And the fourth business partner is critically important at various stages in the business life cycle, and is the attorney. And while most people in business long term don't want to think that they see their attorney more than they see their bank or insurance agent, then that's probably not the case. But there are key stages at startup and growth stages, when opportunities arise, when new customers come around, when employees are added, where regular communication with an attorney can be really critical to the long-term success of the business. And at this point, I want to introduce Natalie Dunham with the Weiss Law Firm, who will speak a little bit more about the legal issues and legal structures that are very important in planning a new business.
Okay, thank you, Scott. I'd like to start by talking about some of the different options for legal structures. When you're starting your business and you go meet with that attorney who's going to become part of your team, one of the first decisions you'll have to make is what form of legal entity you want to use to hold your business. You'll see we have this broken down here into two basic types, non-corporate structures and corporate structures. And we're going to focus mainly today on the corporate structures, because those are the types of entities that are going to provide you as the business owner with the benefit of limited liability. So the most common types of corporate structures that we see are C corporations, which is would include all of your publicly traded companies, and other large businesses are almost always C corporations. Subchapter S corporations are small businesses. They are limited in terms of the number of shareholders they can have, and have other different types of qualifying criteria. So most small businesses, if they are corporations, are going to be Subchapter S corporations. And we'll talk about why that's important for tax reasons a little bit later. And finally, we have limited liability companies, which are a newer form of entity that is kind of a type of hybrid between a partnership and a regular corporation. So some of the issues to consider when you're discussing these different types of corporate structures are, first, your potential liability. And as I said, the main advantage of incorporating your business is that you will have limited liability as the business owner. And limited liability means that you will not be personally liable for the liabilities of the business entity. So for example, if you have a delivery person or a customer who is injured in your store, and all of a sudden you have a $1 million judgment against the business because of this person's injuries, that injured person is not going to be able to attack your personal assets to satisfy that judgment, because again, it's not your personal liability, it's the business's liability. And therefore, your liability individually is limited to the extent of investment that you've made in the business. if everything goes belly up because of this judgment, you're going to lose what you've put into the business, but you're not going to lose your personal assets. But again, remember that that means that you are still losing that investment, and you obviously are going to have a lot of your own personal resources invested in this business, so it's important to protect yourself through insurance and not just completely depend on limited liability. Another example of where limited liability can be important is when your business needs to meet its contractual obligations. Say you need to make a big repair to a piece of equipment, and that means that all of a sudden you have to pay that repair and you can no longer pay a particular supplier. That supplier can't come after you individually to pay that debt. It's a debt of the business. The next issue to consider is ease of formation. And both corporations and limited liability companies are going to require a filing with the State Secretary of State's office. And that's really the first step that an attorney will help you with when you go see someone about setting up your business entity. And generally the filing fees for those are about $110. And the form is fairly simple. You'll need to pick out your corporate name, and you will need to work with your attorney to also develop your operating agreement or shareholders agreement that will basically specify who is going to be managing the business, who makes the decisions, and sets out all of the rights and responsibilities of the different players in that business. So ease of formation, I would say there's not really too significant of a difference between an LLC and a corporation. Next issue to consider is taxation. And if you are a S corporation or an LLC, unless you make a special election with the IRS to be taxed as a C corporation, then an LLC or an S corporation is going to be what's called a pass-through entity, which means that the income of the entity, the deductions that the entity is entitled to, the credits that the entity is entitled to, those are all going to pass through and be reported on your return as the shareholder. So there's no tax up front at the corporate level. Everything flows through to the business owner's tax return. And many people see that as a big advantage of having an S corporation or an LLC, because otherwise, if you're a C corporation, you're paying corporate income tax as a business, and then when the earnings of the business are distributed out to you in the form of dividends, then you're also individually paying income tax on those distributions. And the final issue that we have to discuss on this slide is ownership transferability. And that's another area where the operating agreement or shareholders agreement that I mentioned earlier is extremely important, because those agreements can specify who is allowed to transfer their interest in the business. If you have a partner, for example, can either of you walk away at any time and sell your business to a stranger, or are you and your partner going to agree that you will only buy each other out and will not be allowed to transfer your interest to any third parties? You can also specify the method that's going to be used for valuing your business interests in the event that either of you want to transfer and walk away from the business. And again, those are questions that you may not have the answers to right away, and you may really rely on your attorney to give you some recommendations there, but anytime you're going into business with a partner, it's extremely important to go ahead and get those agreements in place so that in the event something happens and one partner does want to transfer their interest in the business and move on to something else, then you already have those procedures in place, and it's not going to be something where it might end up being a contentious situation or neither of you gets the value out of that transfer that you otherwise might have been able to. So moving on to this final slide about legal structures, this is a chart that summarizes a lot of what we've just gone through. You'll see that LLCs and both types of corporations will provide limited liability. If you are the limited partner in a limited partnership, you also have limited liability, but if you are actually running the business, you're not allowed to be a limited partner, so that's not really going to be applicable to business owners. And then taxation, where it says personal, that means that it will be that the company's tax attributes will flow through to your personal return. And then owner transfer will show you how easy it is, or whether or not as the owner you're allowed to transfer your interest. And again, with the LLC, it's going to depend on the operating agreement or member agreement. And with a sub S corporation, you could also restrict that by a shareholders agreement. And with owner transfer, another issue to consider is not just a particular individual shareholder transferring their interest in the business, but what if you want to sell the entire business? I think that that is a dream that many small business owners have, is that they will eventually get that big offer to cash out and sell the company and go sit on the beach somewhere. So if you are incorporated as an LLC or as a corporation, you have two different options. The purchaser of your business could come in and just buy all of the assets of the entity and receive ownership of the company that way, or they could actually purchase your individual stock or ownership interest in the corporation or LLC. So it really makes everything very neat, because all of those business assets are kind of in a box, and you have that stock certificate or LLC interest that you can transfer yourself individually if you choose to transfer the business that way. So those are, that's a very brief introduction to some of the issues that you'll need to consider with your attorney when you're deciding which form of legal structure to use. And again, I will be available for questions at the end. And now we will go back to Scott to discuss some of the feasibility issues.
Thank you, Natalie. That's it's difficult to give a very concise, clear overview in 10 minutes or less of the full range of legal entity types, but this is a question that we deal with on a very regular basis, and everyone in the process of forming a business needs to give thought to it. And just to speak to just a couple points on this chart on this slide, that as you began in your introduction, really focusing on the corporate entity types, the LLCs and corporations, one of the reasons that we do often encourage people to focus on those bottom half of the chart types of entities is right in the middle, the capital letters FULL. In the category of personal liability, full personal liability should scare most of us. That is one of the great concerns in forming your own business as a sole proprietor or as a general partnership, is that sure, it may be easy. It's that in the United States of America, you can say you're in business, and you technically are. As a sole proprietor, you don't even have to have a separate tax ID number, although you should. But once you begin operating as a business in that regard, the personal liability you bear for any claims, judgments, incidents, accidents of the business are solely you personally and can't be severed from you, the individual. So that's all the reason most of us need to look farther down that list for a more formal form of entity that will protect personal liability. Okay, just moving on to the final part of the presentation, and we'll begin in somewhat of a rapid-fire process to address a number of feasibility issues. Again, we always operate through the Small Business Development Center with the mindset that it's I would much rather ask a hard question on the front end that causes you to step back and look and say, wait a minute, I really didn't think about that. What if that does happen? Yeah, part of our job is to play devil's advocate sometimes, to ask the hard questions and to help you avoid mistakes and to plan ahead on the front end before you're spending real dollars and committing real time to moving forward. So the 5 key areas of feasibility questions that we like to ask and talk through fall in the category of legal and regulatory concerns, technical know-how, market requirements for success, financial conditions, and time commitments in a general sense. We'll jump into each in just a little more detail and keep moving along. The first, the legal and regulatory concerns. We begin with the basic state, city, county licensing registration requirements. Are there, and in a separate question, are there other legal restrictions or limitations to be aware of? This could begin as simply as, are there zoning conditions or zoning guidelines that dictate what types of business activities can and can't be conducted on a certain street, in a certain neighborhood, in a certain part of town. And it could also deal with other regulatory concerns, such as, does the state of South Carolina require a professional license or a general contractor's license for the conduct of that business? Is there some additional step other than just beginning the operation that you need to consider to proceed with a clear mission of the market, with a clear vision, and knowing that you're fully prepared, fully licensed, and have met all the regulatory concerns in that business? And in the other legal restrictions, limitations, because you just never know, it may be a business type or business activity that's with some third party you may not even be aware of that has the legal rights to restrict activities within a sales territory. That may be that someone else holds a license or a franchise rights to conduct that activity within a certain area. So it's where there may be trademark issues or proprietary business secrets that are involved that we just want to ask about on the front end. The second area of feasibility, the technical know-how. Do you have the experience needed to make the business happen from idea to reality? In most cases, it takes a team. It's more than just one person can do to go through the process of forming the business, generating sales, producing, delivering the product, the good or service to the customer, and serving customers long term. And it's really rare that the same individual has the knowledge and the experience to provide that full range of services, from sales and marketing to customer service to manufacturing or consulting or service delivery. And all these things rarely happen in the same person. So if it takes more than yourself, what skills do you have? What skills do you need to find in someone else to make it happen? And the second question here, are there certifications or training programs or some type of a credential that you need to operate in your industry? And it may not be that industry requires a credential or certification in terms of a legal sense requires it, but it might be that if your competition, if other individuals holding themselves out as a consultant or a trainer or an expert in this field have comparable backgrounds, however they hold certificates or credentials from an organization, whether it's a trade group or a state licensing group, it may be the kind of thing that you really need to do that as well, just to be competitive with the marketplace. And speaking of the marketplace, the third area of feasibility, it's not enough to know that you've met the obligations of the law in conducting a business and that you have the technical capacity, the skills you need to conduct the business. But can you connect with the market in a way that makes it profitable to conduct the business, to operate the business, to grow the business, and at some point to find a way to generate income from it or to sell the business outright? And we begin by looking at 2 or 3 general questions. First of all, at the transaction level, can you conduct the business profitably? Can you buy the product, mark it up, and sell it in a way that's profitable? Or can you perform the work for a lower rate than you can charge the customer for the service. If that's a go on the first question, move to the second question. Are there enough customers? It may be that you can sell your product for a profit and do well, but how many times a day do you need to sell that product? How many ice cream cones do you have to sell to pay for the bank loan, or to pay for the truck you borrowed to pull the ice cream cart, the truck you borrowed money for to pull the ice cream cart? So while each transaction might be very profitable, if there aren't enough customers, you can still go broke. So we ask, first of all, at the transaction level, can it be profitable? Secondly, are there enough customers? Is the marketplace large enough for you and your competition to exist profitably? And third, it's a little tougher to nail this one down, but is this the right time and the right place for your business? I just quickly think back to the mid-2000s, 2005, 6, 7. Several times was approached with someone with an idea to launch. They traveled to Chicago, they traveled to New York, to Los Angeles, and seen a retail business. The cupcake shops is one example that comes to mind, where now there are several in the upstate. There are probably a half dozen or more across South Carolina. However, in the early 2000s, it was unheard of to open a business just to sell cupcakes in South Carolina. However, I had clients who had been to Chicago, they'd been to Los Angeles, they'd seen great stores doing a great business, charging way more for a cupcake than I would imagine. And yeah, great idea, no one else is doing that, but maybe there's a reason no one's doing that right here, right now. The market really wasn't ready for that business idea that early. It's obviously much more, now would be a better time than then. And how do you begin to address that question? It really takes research, and there's really not a shortcut around that one. The fourth area of feasibility are the bigger picture of financial conditions. What's it really going to take to start the business? And I generally tell folks, take your first guess, double it, and add about 30% more, because human nature is to underestimate what it's going to take in terms of time and money to start a business. The truth is it always takes longer and costs more than we think it will. And so we like to coach clients through a thorough process of identifying all the small pieces and large pieces of that business startup cost to know what it's really going to take to make it happen. And do you have all those funds yourself, or do you need additional funds? Where will it come from? Do you have enough money to get yourself open and broke, which is a really bad place to be, by the way? Or do you have enough money within the business to survive those first 2, 3, 4 months where you're engaging the marketplace and beginning to generate traffic and establish a customer base? And that leads to the question, can you generate enough income, not just enough general revenue, the top line, this total sales of the business, pay the bills first and yourself last. And you can't spend everything you make in the business personally. Obviously, you have to pay for all your vendors, suppliers, inventory costs of the items you sold, pay the employees, keep the lights on, pay the utilities. On down the list, there's no real shortage of people who you need to pay along the way. And then what's left? Is there still enough to make it worth your while at that point? And the fifth area of feasibility is the time commitment. Well, I said in the last one that starting a business will take longer and cost more than you expect. The take longer really is true every time. So in part of, is this the right time to start a business? Am I the right person to start this business? Ask yourself critically, and these aren't questions I can always answer, but ask yourself, do I have hours in the day? Is this a business that I can start from home in the evenings or on the weekends while I keep a regular job, a daytime job, or can I split my hours at work? Can I take an evening job and have my days free to just work on the business? Do you have free time now? Well, here's a secret you probably won't soon once you begin working on the business. Are you going to need employees, and when? You can only work so many hours a day. If there's more, if there's more work to be done, then that means you're hiring someone else to do it. How soon will you get to that point? How soon will you need to hire someone else? And what will you hire that person to do? Will your first employee be in a support role through administrative or bookkeeping or organizational services to you, the owner, or will that first employee be a second salesperson or in marketing or generating more traffic through the business? So the sooner you can ask yourself, when will I need someone else, and what will that person most likely do, the better. Sometimes you realize that that very first employee might be the most expensive one you have to hire, and you have to rethink the financial piece to how do I have funds in place to pay someone else more than I'm going to make in the early days of the business. And the last point there is that you really need a supportive team in your corner. I can't say enough how stressful starting a new business can be. It's not always this way, but in many cases, the financial commitments, the time commitments, the energy it takes, particularly when you're still in the planning stages and you're still working another job or you still have a full load of responsibilities at home, it really can be draining. And you need to know that your family or your friends, your peer network is going to be supportive and willing to listen to you and talk you off that ledge a few times and keep you encouraged and motivated to see it through. So just to recap a few of the highlights here from this program, new businesses start every day, and you can do it too. I know I've had a lot of challenging points and some questions that I don't want to come across as negative. I just want to encourage you to think ahead, plan ahead, and foresee not just the positive, but also foresee the negative. What if bad things happen? Because sometimes they will, and what happens then? Lots of businesses start, most of them fail. And fail is a strong word. Maybe most of them close within 2 or 3 years. Understand why other businesses fail. There are a lot of reasons out there. What can you do to avoid the situation that causes someone else to fail? Which basically is, again, planning ahead. The first element of success is preparation. Can't say that enough. The next bullet point, don't forget to reach out to an attorney, get some legal advice on the front end before it becomes expensive. I say that because clients will sometimes say, well, we'll do okay for now, but as soon as we need to, then we'll go ask an attorney. Then we'll begin to pay that person by the hour for their knowledge. And often that if something happens, unfortunately, before you have a chance to get that agreement in place or to form the organization, it becomes much more expensive than you anticipate much more quickly. The next point is you really need a team, and your team includes not just yourself or other partners or employees, but also legal, financial, and personal support as well. Again, repeating myself, I know, but study, do your homework, ask the hard questions, research and plan. But last, we're here to help. The Small Business Development Centers, again, with 17 offices across South Carolina, 4 in the upstate. This is what we do. We're here to coach and encourage and consult, and some questions we can answer right away. Sometimes we have to talk through the process with you and direct you farther down the line to next steps. But you really aren't in it by yourself, because we are here to help and provide information along the way.
Okay, Scott, thank you very much. Scott and Natalie, that was terrific information. We do have some questions that we'd like to get through. Scott, this one kicks off to you. How many businesses really do fail, and do you have some idea of why?
That's a great question, Laura. And the numbers differ depending on how the question is asked. One common theme I've seen from a number of different surveys and studies is that it's somewhere in the range of 60 to 80% of businesses that begin, that form, do not survive 3 to 5 years. So somewhere in that first 36 to 60 months, roughly 3 out of 4, almost 4 out of 5 businesses do close. And close doesn't always mean fail. Sometimes close means we sold to someone else and we closed our records with the IRS. We dissolved our entity because we sold the assets of the business. Sometimes close means, well, I was consulting from home and then I got another job, or I moved out of state, so I terminated the tax ID number with the IRS. So, and there really is no good way at a national level to know why every business fails or closes. But statistics do show that consistently between 60 to 80% of businesses don't survive beyond 3 to 5 years. The reasons why, over and over again, come back to inadequate funding, a poor location, lack of a well-thought-out business plan, poor management decisions early in the business, growing too quickly, expanding too quickly, insufficient marketing or promotion, inadequate financing or capital at the start of the business. And one theme I see from each of these most common elements is that it really comes back to a lack of planning. If you had thoroughly planned, if you knew what kind of reserves you need on hand to fund that marketing and promotion efforts, then you probably wouldn't be struggling from a lack of marketing and a lack of customer traffic because you weren't able to promote the business. Inadequate funding is sometimes the reality of you know what you need and you just can't find it. Sometimes inadequate funding means we thought we had enough, but we really didn't plan on A, B, C, or D happening. So a thorough business plan, asking the hard questions, and planning for something other than just best case scenario over and over again really help to promote long-term survival of a business.
Okay. When you were talking about financing, you talked about personal credit. What is my personal credit situation? What about business credit? Why does my personal credit matter so much?
Business credit isn't completely a myth. However, until your business has the opportunity to establish a history of paying vendors and being credible in terms of meeting your obligations and paying your debts and being a trustworthy trading partner, over and over again, commercial institutions, your customers, your landlord, your bank, your vendors are going to look first and foremost at the creditworthiness, the credit history, the credit score of the owner of the business as the best indicator of, can I trust this person, this business, to pay me back? Whether that's often commercial landlords are going to do a credit check before they commit a 3 to 5 year lease to a customer. And every time, if you're looking for any funding from a bank, credit union, other commercial lender, until the business has a chance to establish its own history and think 3 to 5 years, sometimes more, the credit history of the borrower is the only indication that a lender has to go on. So just because you're forming a new business and you may form a corporation, it may be a very formal structure. If the business doesn't have its own history, the history of the borrower, the history of the business owner is going to be the history that's looked to every time.
Okay. Natalie, this one is for you. How do I know if I really need to incorporate, and how would I choose between, say, being an LLC or an S Corp?
Yeah, I really would recommend that any business owner choose some kind of corporate entity, whether it is a corporation or an LLC. There are certainly particular types of businesses that may have more liability risks associated with a particular industry, but really any business owner can benefit from limited liability and those other advantages that we discussed earlier. So it's, you know, really anyone can benefit from incorporating, and there's not much reason not to do it, just as an additional way to protect your business and make sure that this new enterprise is going to be successful. And in terms of corporation versus LLC, you know, it really can just depend on maybe your history in business. Maybe you've been involved in a particular kind of entity before and you're familiar with it. Your attorney can certainly advise you once they know the specifics of your type of industry and your type of business that you're going to do. If you're going to have, you know, maybe some passive investors that are going to be shareholders, that can change the type of business entity that you might want to use. So it's really a very individualized analysis that your own attorney can help you with. But, you know, the general idea of having that separate entity in place and taking advantage of limited liability is always going to be a good idea for any business.
Okay. This one's kind of for both of you. It is sort of a legal question, but how do I find out about all the legal issues, city, county, or state-related issues? And aren't they all the same?
I'll jump in there first with that one. It's going to be state law that governs the process of actually forming the business entity, and state law sets the rules for the different types of organizations that you can have. So that's really always going to be the place to start. And if you're then going on to look at local zoning regulations or applying for a local business license, then you're going to need to do that application in the name of the entity. So it really does need to start with the state level.
Okay.
I would agree as well that the state level is where most of the big picture issues are addressed and resolved. And it's where typically we find a lot of expertise in terms of regulatory and licensing issues for a number of businesses. In fact, the state organization's Department of Labor Licensing Regulation, DLLR, here in South Carolina, is the primary state-level government body that administers professional license exams and monitors the organization we use to establish trust in professionals, everyone from cosmetologists, beauticians, barbers, elevators, amusement park rides, plumbers, electricians, trades, contractors. A wide range of fields are regulated at the state level there, and in almost any case where this Department of Health, Environmental Control, or Human Services, if an issue isn't regulated by the state organization can typically tell you where you do need to look. If the state offices would be aware of local guidelines that would be applicable almost all the time, or if there are federal guidelines that would address you as a professional, whether it be a federal firearms licensing or something like that. The state entities are probably governed by and deal with these federal organizations on a regular basis. So that's a great place to look and to ask them. Beyond those examples, business licenses in South Carolina are issued by the most local government bodies. The cities and towns in South Carolina have the right, the purview to license conduct of a business within their city. And you typically, if you are outside the city, would then look to, and I guess in zoning is most specific based on the geography. If there are, in South Carolina, more cities are likely to have restrictive or prescriptive zoning guidelines to follow. Fewer counties do. But if you are outside the city, then default up to the county government to talk to land use, land planning as well. So there really isn't a seamless path to follow, but starting at the state, covering the entity formation first, asking those organizations at the state level, and we can help you find them because there's not one entity that everyone has to deal with. Then ask them up and down to the federal and down to the local level for guidance as well.
Okay. You talked before about making sure I knew where my market was. Is there enough of a market here for my product or services? How do I find out? How do I find information on that? Where would you send me?
In some cases, and that is a very good question, and it's not always an easy question, and it requires a good bit of context to understand as much as you know about your customer, your target market, what type of individual, what age, what education level, what income level you really are going into business to serve. There are some a number of ways to research that information. We have access to some research databases through part of our national associations. The public library system is a great place to start. And libraries differ a little bit in terms of the resources they have available, but most of the public libraries across South Carolina do have staff who can help you obtain access to online databases for research, as well as it's always important to look at the industry you're going to serve, and often the trade associations, the industry groups that are already out there in the marketplace make a lot of information available about their customers or about their membership that you can find valuable as well. So those are a few of the places that we would tend to help you look. It's through research databases, through information available through the public libraries. It may be that there are government census or other government data sets that you can research, and trade associations.
Okay. When you talked before about time commitments, you scared me. Does anyone ever have enough time to start a business?
Again, that's a great question, and I wish there was an easy answer, but the truth is that things worth doing tend to take time, and if you look at starting a new business as a long-term perspective, and if you know the goal you want to get to, you realize it's going to take a lot of those steps to make that long journey. And in the planning process is when you can save yourself a lot of time by looking ahead to anticipating issues that are going to come up at some point down the road, and giving yourself a long planning window is often a great benefit to starting a small business, because businesses that are formed in haste, in a rush, and trying to take advantage of a very, very narrow window of opportunity, I encourage people to think all the time that if the real value in this business is defined by such a narrow window of opportunity, what makes you think it's going to last more than 6 months? So it is important to begin allowing yourself a few hours a day, a few hours a week, whatever you can, to work through the planning process to answer these questions, so that when you do get closer and closer to moving forward, you're familiar with and you're comfortable with budgeting that time for the business itself, and B, you learn to find out who these people are who can help you in the planning process. You learn to appreciate the value of other professionals, other consultants who can help you, who can free up your time to move the business forward as you get going.
Okay. Well, that was excellent information, and again, I want to thank both Scott and Natalie for their time. In the interest of time, we're going to conclude the Q&A session now. Before we get back to Scott for some closing thoughts, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to Portfolio. We are a communication company based in Greenville, South Carolina. We provide communication services, planning, and logistical support for web seminars like this one around the United States. We offer a full slate of communication services ranging from writing, editing, and design, social media support, and media relations. You can find out more about us at www.portfoliosc.com. Now back to Scott for a wrap-up.
Thanks, Laura. Hopefully we've covered a lot of questions at a very high level and answered at least a few of the things that were in your mind before you began the seminar. And at this point, I want to look forward to the next couple of sessions. Again, we tried to break this format down into several pieces that are manageable, that are somewhat bite-sized. And this first overview may have been enough to convince you that, you know what, not me, not now, no way. And I'm okay with that. If I can talk you out of moving a business idea forward in 45 minutes or so, then you probably weren't very committed anyway. But again, don't take my word for it. If you still feel like there's a great opportunity, a great value in the business idea, do encourage you to look into the next session. Session 2 of this Jumpstart series addresses the business plan. We provide some great tools there to get you started on that process. And Session 3 also is available to cover licensing and some of the general regulation issues, as well as a heavy dose of the basic financial concepts to be dealt with in starting a new business. For more information, our website is always available at www.clemson.edu/SBDC for more information about the other seminars we offer as well. Thank you, Laura, and do look forward to your questions, and our organization is available to help as you move forward.